Well, I did promise you that we would be talking more often to David Shapiro this year, but only when there was something relevant for him to say. Well, the last interview we had on the titans of South African business, where are they today, elicited a lot of response. But today we got a follow-up, even though you might not think it is at first glance. Stay with us. So, David, I was away over the weekend. I've got to tell you about the guy that I met. Because, okay, before telling you this, who was the person who did the Naspers deal with Tencent? I mean, given its impact on South Africa, given the way it's transformed so many retirement people.
Yeah.
So who's the one who did it?
Chris. Was it Chris?
Chris
Becker.
No. So let me tell you the story. I go to St. Francis. You know my friend Mike Wiley.
Of course.
I mean, Mike has been my friend for
Wilson Bailey.
Yeah, he's retired a long time ago, but he's just one of the mentors of the world. And I'm with Mike, and he says, "Hey, I've got this friend that you need to that I'd like to introduce you to." And he said his name is Hans Haarwinkels. Okay, so I remember reading about Hans Haarwinkels as being the guy who actually did the deal with Tencent in Hong Kong. He was sent by Naspers to Hong Kong to build up their operations. And so I asked him, I said, look, I don't want to pry or this is old stuff, but what happened there? And my goodness, he gave me the story. It was a complicated, fascinating story of how Pony Ma actually got on with him and how they didn't have any money at Naspers, so they had to approach Dani Cronje. Remember Dani Cronje from ABSA?
From Nedbank.
And
ABSA, it was the ABSA.
ABSA, yeah. Oh, don't say Nedbank. And he'll never forgive you. And then Dani took a calculated risk on giving them the $30 million to make the investment into Naspers, into Tencent, and Hans Haarwinkels had to convince the board. They didn't know anything about it. They just knew here was their guy in Hong Kong who had, by the way, run MultiChoice, but he got no credit. And you know what was even worse? He was there. He worked for Naspers. They sent him to Hong Kong on a 5-year contract, and he gets to Hong Kong. He does this deal on Tencent. Nobody knows yet how amazing it's going to be, how massively transformative it's going to be. And then they don't renew his contract. So this oak who did it all gets no credit, no income. And I said to him, doesn't it, piss you off? And he said, it's in the past. It's in the past. But I think the issue is other people shouldn't take the credit. It's not right.
So why has everybody attributed this to Chris? Not taking anything away from Chris. It's very difficult if you weren't part of the deal, if you weren't the person who actually started the negotiation, not to give credit.
No, you're the guy sitting in Cape Town.
I've never heard this before, Alec.
Yeah,
I've never.
You're sitting in Cape Town. You sign off okay, we're going to do it, and they, it's organized. Everything's organized. Dani Cronje has given you the money. Your guy on the ground who was very successfully built a MultiChoice for you on top of it, and then, well, I guess if you look back at that time, Naspers was really struggling. They were doing a lot of stupid things, losing a lot of money in a lot of places, and in the context in that. Hans Haarwinkels went. Anyway, so that while I'm there, I get this voice message from you, and it's something that shook me rigid. Take us through the story there, exactly what happened, because it's come into the public domain, but it's not really getting the attention that it deserves. The story around Roedean and King David.
I think why it hurt me and why I responded like that was I got to take just a step back, because you had a wonderful editorial in Biz News, and I think which also gave a bit of history about the Jewish community and our long history in South Africa. And I have to tell you, Eric, in all the years that I've been here, and I mean, my whole life I've lived in South Africa, nowhere else, we've always had a very prosperous time in South Africa. From the time that the Jews came here, running away from the pogroms, my grandparents, both sides, ran away from pogroms and poverty in Russia and Lithuania, and settled in South Africa without money, but certainly made a living. And subsequent to that, the Jewish community has contributed in a very big way, and we've never felt this overt anti-Semitism. If you understand what I mean, yes, there was always, I played soccer for Commie Wits, during the 60s, and they'd call me Akkerkop. Akkerkop is an acorn head, which comes from the circumcision. You know what I mean? It's so there were those kind of insults which you brushed off, or yoiki or whatever it was, and after the match you'd go shake hands, and that, it was, you didn't feel it in the same way as we're starting to feel it now. And throughout, and even after October the 7th, 2023, even leading up to that, even after that, we haven't really felt a lot of pressure. If you go to Sydenham or you go to Glen Hazel in the evenings, you'll still see families on a Friday evening walking to shul, or on Saturdays walking back with their families. They're not surrounded by armed guards or anything. So despite the fact that government have turned against the state of Israel and against Jews, there hasn't been any kind of overt anti-Semitism, or I can't feel it. There are incidences and so on. But this was the first time where I felt, hold on, you're now preventing school children from completing a tennis match.
Dave, just explain what happened.
Okay,
just explain what happened, because there's some people watching this who kind of aren't up to date.
So apparently a game had been arranged between King David. This was a normal fixture between schools, between King David and between Roedean. And it was
And King David's a Jewish school.
It's a Jewish school. Now, if I can explain that, because it's important. My 3 kids went to King David. I've got 2 grandchildren. Yes, there's an affiliation with Israel, but this is not a militant Zionist school. This is a very middle-of-the-road school where, kids in the community go there. They go there for academic achievement. They're not a great sporting school. They're typical people of our community. So many business people today, so many professionals were schooled at King David, and they're certainly not radicals in any kind of sense. Anyway, the point is that Roedean cancelled or postponed the game, or whatever the reason, and said, we're having trouble. I don't know the exact conversations. I haven't got them in front of me, but there was an issue. And when the principals phoned each other and got together, it appeared that the parents or the board from Roedean did not want the game to take place because of the school, and I'm putting it into my own words, because they were Jewish. They gave other excuses down the way, and they tried to get their way, get themselves out of it. They did say they postponed the game and that they could come the next day on the Wednesday, and they thought the match was on, but when they arrived there was nobody there. There was no one there to greet them. It wasn't, there certainly wasn't a welcome committee. And that led to the tape or the message that I sent you, which was from one of the high school masters who'd been there 36 years. They were completely snubbed. And subsequent to that, issues have come out around the whole game, that there were parents at Roedean who did not want their children to play against King David. They've tried to soften it by saying they were scared of maybe security issues, whatever it is. Believe me, there's nothing scary about a few Jewish schoolgirls. They're coming with tennis rackets. They're not coming with Uzis. And they're certainly not coming with an army to protect them. And I think the whole thing was blown out and was very concerning, because this is the first time that we'd seen anything like this. We are not going to play against you because you're Jewish. And it set a precedent which upset me. I've never seen this. Remember, during the early days of after 1994, there were certain Afrikaans schools wouldn't allow their schools to play against black schools. We sorted that out, and they became scandalous. And I think to a large extent, we've overcome that. But this was the first against the Jewish community, where you saw a school of Rhodeans nobility, of their legacy. This is a school that goes back to the early 1900s. It's a beautiful school. It's one of the top schools in South Africa, together with St. John's and Bishops and various other schools like this, Kingsmead and that. So this was a very overt act of anti-Semitism.
David, it does appear as though there's a broader issue here. The anti-Semitism is hectic, and I'm going to ask you for more on that in a moment. But of leadership, it appears that there were some hotheads, perhaps, let's hope, amongst the Roedean parent body who said, our children are not going to play against Jewish children because we don't like what Israel's doing. Say, whatever. That was where they were coming from. The leadership response to that, instead of in this way, well, that's fine, we won't play against them anymore, just capitulated to, one hopes and prays it was a tiny percentage of the parent body. But what, from your perspective, because we see leadership vacuums all over, and we also see it in business. Now, I want to tell you a little story. You may not remember, but there was a West Ham United player who kicked a cat, and his brother recorded it. What a fool. Anyway, his brother recorded it. He kicked a cat. Discovery cancelled its sponsorship with West Ham. Now, most people wouldn't remember that just because I support this poor team. I remember it very well. Within days, they cancelled their contract. Here we've got something else. I haven't heard from Discovery. I haven't heard from Nando's. Haven't heard from anyone in the corporate community to stand up and say, hey guys, this is wrong. Whatever support we were giving you, Roedean, goodbye. It's out. Or we're suspending it until you get your act together. That, again, sends a signal to me about leadership, in this instance, from the corporate sector.
I think you raise a very important point there. I was disappointed that there wasn't that kind of reaction. I responded. I'm apolitical, Alec. I don't like to get involved in politics. I look at the economy, and I like to focus on what should be done in the economy, where we should be going. That's always been the angle that I've taken. I've never taken a strong political stand. And as you know, I'm married into a very political family. In fact, yesterday was 36 years since Mandela was released from prison. In fact, a few days earlier than that, when de Klerk declared the end of apartheid, my mother-in-law, for the first time since 1964, was free. She was free. She was unbanned. So I come from that kind of background. And even then, I've always joked that, while my wife remembers all these days, I'm more worried where the S&P is, what's happening on the markets. But this struck a nerve. This struck a chord with me, and it upset me, that there was this overt act against Jewish kids. My kids are there. I've got grandkids there. All those names that you mentioned have either been there themselves or have children there themselves. And I'm surprised that they're not standing up. And I think the fear is the fear of a backlash. And you can get a pretty violent backlash. I picked up on social media. With my Twitter account was stolen a few years ago. And I haven't really bothered building it up again. But the violent action that I got from actually defending or highlighting it. And in the first tweet, I said, I hope this isn't true. And this came from very prominent people, the hatred against Jews, associating any Jew, particularly King David, with Zionism. Okay, that was the connection, which I said, hold on a sec. You don't know the community. Yes, there's an affiliation, but not every Jew in South Africa is necessarily believes in, they want Israel to survive. They want it to thrive and prosper and so on. But you can't brand them as Zionists. And, from that point of view, therefore, it was correct not to play against King David. That was the line of thought. Because King David has an affiliation, they're associated with the IDF, the Israeli army, which went into Gaza. Now, I want to tell you another point. Alec, the anti-Semitism against the Jewish community here in South Africa and against Jews worldwide didn't start after the IDF invaded Gaza. It wasn't because of the bombing. It started when Hamas invaded Israel. Flags came out cheering the action against apartheid Israel, and that's when it started. And that's where the gathering of this hatred began, which had been building up for a long time. And that was the odd thing. No matter what Israel did, they were damned. We can debate for hours whether they did the right thing, whether they didn't do the right thing, whether it was, whether they overdid it. It's going to be debated for a long time. But it was at that time, in fact, on October the 7th, that the hatred against the Jews happened. And also, once Israel invaded, the anti-Semitism that's always there, that's been around for 3,000 years, it actually triggered, it gave people the license now to be overtly anti-Semitic. So, it's Zionism, We hate the Jews, but, no, we don't hate Jews. Some of my best friends are Jewish, but what Israel's doing is wrong. And that's where it started. And that's been the frightening aspect of this whole thing. Mr. Ramaphosa himself, his success in the early 90s, he had a lot of support from Brian Joffe, from Stephen Kossoff in Investec, Brian Joffe from Bidvest, Stephen Levenberg, Ivan Glazenberg, you name it. The lawyers, his lawyers were Jewish. His accountants were Jewish. Suddenly, from October the 7th, everything changed. Did a 180-degree turnaround against the community. Won't even talk to them today. So that's where the frightening part of it is, around the whole Israeli attack on Gaza. No one will know, who's going to be able to explain this or be able to debate this. You've got two terribly opposing sides, that will never meet in the middle or understand each other's side, whatever.
David, if I just take it one step further, you've always been very pragmatic when it comes to South Africa. And as you said earlier, and crumbs, we have worked together for decades. So I know you as well as, not as well as Linda, but I do know you as well as anybody who's in your circle. And you really have never been someone to say, go and vote for the DA or go and vote for the ANC or vote for whoever Action is. You just aren't like, that's not you. But in this case, what's happened here, has it given you, even a pragmatist like you, pause? Because if there is going to be this kind of reaction, and it's small and there has been a reaction to it, but if there's this kind of issue that is now raising its head, do you feel, as a Jew, I'm asking you now, safe in this country into the long term? Because this, certainly if they did this to English-speaking South Africans, for instance, I would have pause. There is no doubt about that.
That's an excellent thought. What do you do? And I carry on. You've described me well. I don't get involved. I get to work every day. I do what I do. I respond to any kind of request for help or service. I've never differentiated on any kind of racial or religious grounds, and I've always had a very deep love for South Africa. My kids are not here, so I go to America, I go to Australia. I've got a son here with 3 children here who's very religious. It doesn't affect me. It doesn't mean because of this that tomorrow I'm going to walk around with armed guard, not at all. And I don't think we're going to see that kind of reaction. We're not going to see protests or anything. But it was this simple act of saying, we don't want Jewish kids in our school. You know what I mean? We don't want to play against you. To me, that was crossing a line that I have never seen before. That to me worried me and worries me. And I thought, if we don't get on top of it, if we don't highlight this and stop this kind of action, then it can develop. You know, Alec, I think there, as a Jewish person, as a Jew, we all studied the Holocaust. We've studied anti-Semitism throughout the ages. And that's what started in Germany, where suddenly your best friends were no longer allowed to play with you. As long as all of a sudden you couldn't go. This is Germany. And the Germans, the Germans were proud. They were proud of their country. They loved their country, and they could never understand, why me? I'm German. They said, well, you're Jewish. No, I'm not Jewish. I'm German. And they couldn't understand that action. And to a large extent, I'm sure that the same people from King David, the same players, they don't see themselves as Zionists, militants. They just came to play tennis. And where you start stopping them going, the next thing is, you're not allowed into this hall, or you're not allowed into this park. That's where you start to find, that for me is the worry, where it might not be public policy or law, but it is a reaction, where people say, okay, we've got the license. Roedean got away with it. We can do it too. And that's where I come. And I'm surprised. I think those people you spoke about, the big names in the Jewish community, should come out, or should have come out. There were a few of us that started this, and I have, full credit to you for publishing that editorial. I think it was Marika that wrote it. Beautifully written, magnificently written. Very, very good article. I saw from Jonathan Katzenellenbogen yesterday, also an article in the Daily Friend. And we need more of that kind of reaction to say, okay, we South Africans, we want to help build up the country. We're doctors, we're lawyers, we're whatever it is. Don't do this. Don't do this. Don't make our kids leave. Don't make our kids leave. They're already leaving because of this, because of the reaction. You don't want another flood. You don't want people to feel that they're not welcome here and that we've got to go.
What about the whole point, maybe to close off, was on leadership? Because if you are the headmistress of a school, it's almost like you're running a corporation. And it's a big organization. You've got many your clients are especially a private school, your clients are the parents. And you have to know how to teach. There's a certain line that clients cannot cross, as they would with you. If someone tries to abuse us or any of our team at BizNews, we just tell them to jump in the lake, and we will rather terminate any relationship we have with them. It seems perhaps the headmistresses, headmasters aren't as well trained in that field, because I see there's been a lot of concern or a lot of criticism about, show some backbone, for heaven's sake. You got to know where your values are. This is a Christian school. Christian schools aren't supposed to do that in the first instance. And you wonder, why would a Christian school suddenly not want to play with a Jewish school? I could maybe vaguely think of other religions might feel that way, but not a Christian religion. There's never been that antagonism. So where does all of this come from? Dave, leadership. It's something that we lack in South Africa. I don't know if you had the dubious honor of watching yesterday when Paul O'Sullivan was in Parliament. It was extraordinary. He goes along there to lay evidence in front of the parliamentary committee, ad hoc committee, and all that happens is he gets attacked from every angle, and he was subject, and it was almost like, the one little attacker comes and punches, and often they really weren't that smart. And then the next one would repeat certain things and then punches. And it's almost like they were attacking him in relays. Now, you've got to wonder whether anybody else is going to be prepared to blow any whistles or share any evidence if that's the kind of treatment that they might be subjected to. Lack of leadership again.
Absolutely. That's the whole point. We've got a constitution. Live by it. Live by it. Nowhere in the constitution does it say you can, you should attack Jewish students or anything like that, or anybody. I mean, it's a very solid, well-written document, and you've got to live by it. And I think you come back to leadership. My big fear is that in a situation like this, the current government would not stand up for the Jewish school. And you could see it by the reaction that you get on social media. You say, hold on, we've got no support. You know, there are 50,000 Jews in South Africa against a population of 50 million. The odds are against you. And the whole idea is, well, they don't matter. You know, it doesn't matter. So I think in this instance, this whole thing could have been sorted out if you had a very strong leadership at Roedean saying, listen, you know, lay down the rules. This is who we are. This is our ethos. This is our credo. These are the values, you know, that we stand by. We're going to play this game. If you don't like it, we'll discuss it perhaps in a different forum and so on. But we can't go against this. You know, we can't do what you have suggested us to do. And I believe that the head mistress from Roedean is now resigned as a result of this. An apology has been written. I've got to confirm all of this, Alec, but I believe so, which is the right way that it should be done. You know, and what they should do is, I would say, and this is my view, I'm not talking on behalf of King David. Okay, let's rearrange the game. Let the girls come and finish it off, because that's what they wanted. That's all they wanted. They didn't want to make a political statement. They just wanted to play the tennis match, and without any issues around it. And there are no parents, you know, and parents should keep away. They shouldn't make a specialty. They shouldn't do anything that they wouldn't do. Just play it as it should have been played. But Alec, there's one point that I think is important to me and where I stand at the moment. And I think it involves South Africa. When I look at where the global economy is going, and it's going in different directions. And I'm a big AI man. You know, I still think that we're into a massive growth area. You can see the numbers that are being spent by the large businesses. America is going to get more powerful, whether we like it or not. They're spending billions and trillions on building data centers. China's also doing that. Those are the two economies, you know, that are doing it. We're doing nothing. And I'm saying, don't be a fool. You know what I mean? Get friendly with these businesses if we want to grow. Stop isolating them. Stop trying to be, you know, a political economy. Just build this economy for the good of the people. We're not doing that. And, you know, I always say, you remember my late friend, Jack Shapiro? Did you remember Jack?
Gypsy Jack from remember his name was Gypsy Jack because he dressed up as Wits University. He was the cheerleader.
Yeah, Jack
Shapiro, one and only.
Jack. And old Jack used to say to me, he said, David, if ever you go into a pub, look for the biggest man there, because if there's ever trouble, go and buy him a drink. Because if there is trouble, he's going to be on your side. And I say it in the same way about South Africa. Look for the biggest economy. Become friends with them, because if there's trouble, they'll help you. And we're not going that way, Alec. We're going the opposite way. And I find that the tragedy of where we are at the moment. So in every respect, so.
Well, the Chinese have got kung fu, so. But unfortunately, they don't ride to the rescue. They're not the biggest guy in the pub. Whereas the biggest guy in the pub, you bought him a beer, he might be getting another beer from you sometime. He could come to your defense. Clearly, the Chinese they got too much going on in their own country that they need without being able to help anybody else. It's really good, practical, sensible advice that sadly we do seem just to forget, just the basics, just the normal, honest things. A guy comes to Parliament like O'Sullivan, you might not like him, you might hate him, you might have crossed swords with him, but just let him lay his evidence down. Don't make it into a personal attack. And if you're going to play tennis against another school, you might not like what's happening in Israel, but that's got bugger all to do with the 16-year-old girls who are going to come and swing a tennis racket against you. In fact, you give them a chance, you'll probably be pretty friendly with them. And if something does go wrong, don't stand aside and do nothing. As Edward Burke said so long ago, Evil flourishes when good men stand aside and do nothing. And David, we can never accuse you of that. You always have been a good man. David Shapiro is with Sasfin Securities. I'm Alec Hogg from biznews.com.